Hey everyone, welcome to Pick Up the Truth. Now today I wanna do a video on the system of money and how it controls us in our daily lives and who invented it and for what reason. Now, right here I have a video of how the world that controls us and enslaves us describes the money system, but we're going to look at it on more of a truth-based level because, as you can tell, there's a lot of Masonic signs and symbols in this video, and it starts off with the biggest lie of all, with the globe Earth, the round Earth, one they've been trying to push down our throat all our lives. So we already know this video is based in lies for some reason or another. They have an agenda to show us some of the secrets they're showing us, but we'll get into that when we break down this video in real truth. So let's get to it.
You are about to learn one of the biggest secrets in the history of the world. It's a secret that has huge effects for everyone who lives on this planet. Most people can feel deep down that something isn't quite right with the world economy, but few know what it is. Gone are the days where a family could be more out of control, yet only 1 in a million understand why. You are about to discover the system that is ultimately responsible for most of the inequality in our world today. The powers that be do not want you to know about this, as this system is what has kept them at the top of the financial food chain for the last 100 years. Learning this will change your life because it'll change the choices that you make. If enough people learn it, it'll change the world because it'll change the system. For this is the biggest hidden secret of money. Never in human history have so...
Now, before we get into the video, I want to take some time to point out what mankind was doing before the invention of money, before the Masons invented money to control us, I should say. What was mankind doing? Well, I imagine we were enjoying the creation that was created for us, such as the earth. We were freely living from the earth that was created for us because we are creation ourselves. And we didn't need a form of currency or money to tell us that we could freely live on the land that was created for us. And we didn't need money to tell us we could freely eat from the land and drink from the land that was created for us. And we didn't need anybody to tell us we needed money to buy the essential things that we needed to survive on the earth that was created for us. But let's get back into the video.
Many been plundered by so few, and it's all accomplished through this, the biggest scam in the history of mankind. They say that money doesn't grow on trees, but the truth is that the modern banking system creates currency far faster.
Now, they say that money doesn't grow on trees. Now, that's a lie. We know, because paper comes from the destruction of trees, which is creation.
Than trees can grow. Most people don't have a clue how currency is created. Economists and bankers make it sound so complex that people think they can't understand it. But I'm going to strip our monetary system down to its essence so that you can see the scam behind the curtain and just how it affects you. Every modern society creates currency in pretty much the same way. But since the US dollar is the majority of the world's currency, I'm going to use the United States as our example.
Now he said all nations. All nations that have people to be controlled are controlled by currency. So they make sure that they have all the lands covered that they can possibly steal from the people that it was created for. Okay? They want to make sure that they steal all the land and all the resources of all the people in every nation.
It all starts when some politician says, vote for me and I'll make sure the government provides you more free stuff than my opponent will. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. So to provide that supposedly free stuff, the politicians vote for the country to spend more than its income. This is called deficit spending. To pay for that deficit spending, the Treasury borrows currency by issuing a bond. So what's a bond? If you think about it, a bond is really nothing but a glorified IOU. It's a pretty piece of paper with numbers printed on it that says,
this bond is how they keep us in bondage. They invented this fake piece of paper to take our natural creation away from us and enslave us into bondage with the worthless paper that they invented.
loan me $1 trillion today, and I promise over a 10-year period I'm going to pay you back that $1 trillion plus interest. But what you need to understand is that Treasury bonds are our national debt. These glorified IOUs are to be paid back by you and I and our descendants through future taxation. Therefore, when the government issues a bond, it steals prosperity out of the future so that it can spend it today. The Treasury then holds a bond auction, and the world's largest banks show up and compete to buy part of our national debt and make a profit on it by earning interest. You'll notice that as we move through this process, the big banks are there, taking a cut every step of the way. This isn't by chance, as you'll see shortly. Then, through a shell game called open market operations, the banks get to sell some of those bonds to the Federal Reserve at a profit. To pay for the bonds, the Federal Reserve opens up its big old checkbook and writes bad, bogus, counterfeit checks that should bounce because they're drawn on an account that always has a zero balance. There isn't one penny in there. To quote from the Boston Federal Reserve, when you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover that check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money. The Fed then hands those checks to the banks, and at this point, currency springs into existence. The banks then take that currency.
See, they have to create currency with the false pieces of paper, the IOUs, because money itself is fictitious.
And buy more bonds at the next Treasury auction. But what is a check? A check is also an IOU. When you write a check, you're making a note that says, here's my IOU for cash. All you have to do is go to the bank and pick it up. Now, it's very, very important that you understand this process because we're going to come back later and show you the devastating effect this has on you. The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. The Federal Reserve and the government mistakenly call it base money because they didn't watch episode 1 of this series. And
now, he's explaining to you the system on how they enslave us into the false system of money they created so we could turn around and buy the material items and resources they stolen from us they've stolen from us from creation. Now, I know you're noticing this C, the Masonic C, and the pyramid on the screen. Of course, you're going to see that from this Masonic system that controls us. And this is only used as a teaching tool to help us understand what's being done to us. So just don't even pay attention to that.
They don't know the difference between money and currency. But I will correctly refer to it as base currency because it is not money. It is currency, and as we've learned, there is a big difference. Money has to be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power over long periods of time. We learned in episode 1 that earlier in our history, our paper currency was just a claim check. It was a representation for real money of intrinsic value, the gold and silver that was held on deposit at the Treasury. You could walk into any bank and slap your currency, like say a $20 bill, on the counter and redeem it for real money, a $20 gold piece. But now, this base currency that's piling up back here is really nothing but a receipt or a claim check on an IOU, that bond. So it's really nothing but a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the newly created currency into the various branches of the government, and the politicians say, "Hey, thanks for that." And the government does some deficit spending on public works, social programs, and war. The government employees, contractors, and soldiers then deposit their pay in the banks. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but when you deposit your currency with the bank, you're not actually depositing it into an account to be safely held in trust for you. Instead, you're actually loaning the bank your currency, and within certain legal limits, they can do with it pretty much anything they please. This includes gambling in the stock market and loaning it out, at a profit, of course. Now this is where the machine of currency creation really gets cranking, because this is...
Now, he's explaining to us in a detailed way of how the people who invented the money and the people who control us with the money they invented actually have multiple ways that they steal the money that they invented to control us with.
Where something called fractional reserve lending comes into play. Fractional reserve lending is exactly what it says. The banks are allowed to reserve only a fraction of your deposit and loan the rest out. Although reserve ratios may vary, I'm going to use a 10% reserve ratio as our example. If you deposit $100 in your account, the bank can legally take $90 of it and loan it out without telling you. The bank must hold $10 of your deposit in reserve just in case you want some of it. These reserves are called vault cash. But why does your bank account still say you have $100 if the bank has stolen $90 of it? Because the bank...
See, they have to do this because in reality, there's not enough money in circulation for everybody on the earth that they control.
The bank left IOUs it created, called bank credit, in its place. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but here it is in black and white from the Fed. Commercial banks create checkbook money when they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in accounts on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. These are nothing but numbers that the banks type into their computers. And even though these bank credit IOU numbers are very different from base currency numbers, because they only exist in computers, they are still currency. So now there is $190 in existence. Now, the reason people take out loans from the banks is to buy something. They're going to buy a house or a car or something like that. So the borrower takes the $90 that the bank loaned to him from your account, and he pays the seller of the item. But then the seller deposits that currency into his account, and his bank loans out 90% of that and leaves bank credit numbers in its place. So now there's $271 in existence. This process repeats and repeats until under a 10% reserve ratio, an initial deposit of just $100 can create up to $1,000 of bank credit, all backed by $100 of vault cash, just 10%. But as I said, reserve ratios vary wildly. On some deposits, it's 10%, on others, it's 3%, and on some forms of deposits, reserve requirements are zero. The result is that the expansion of the currency supply by the banks is far greater than even this example would lead you to believe. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact,
now, what he is describing to me looks like a pyramid Ponzi scheme where they steal the money that they invented to control us with so they can steal creation, and now they want to steal the money that they supply us to steal creation with. It's complicated, but that's why most people never figure this out. If you get lost in the details of the system, of the lies in the system that controls you, then you'll never be able to look at the big picture and figure out what they're doing. But that's why we're here to break it down in truth and see what they're actually doing to us.
92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created, not by the government, but here in the banking system. Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1, that the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from.
Now, the prices of everyday goods and services. What's that mean? Well, the goods are what we need to survive with. And the services are the labor that comes from everybody on the earth.
The definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply is nothing but a couple of bucks whipped up in this hocus-pocus scam where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve swap glorified IOUs and a bunch of numbers that the banks just type into their computers. That's it. That's our entire currency supply. It's nothing but a supply of numbers. Some of them printed, most of them typed, and there is nothing else. But if you thought that was crazy, get ready.
Now, you see how the people that control us, and the person doing this video admits that this system is nothing but a system that was built to control us, a system that was built to rip us off.
Ready to enter the twilight zone of modern economics. We work for some of that currency supply. True wealth is your time, but we trade away moments of our lives, hour by hour, day by day.
Now, as we learned in our lessons on how they control us with time, he's also explaining to us that we get paid with this fictitious money hour by hour, year by year, for the rest of our lives, for our services that we're not really supposed to render, because this system that we're controlled by and enslaved by is fictitious.
And year by year, for numbers that somebody printed on pieces of paper or just typed into a computer. Now those numbers represent our blood, sweat, tears, labor, ideas, and talent. We are what gives the currency its value. But here comes the really cruel joke. We work hard so that we can save some of that currency.
So another thing we can take from this is that we make this system work. Okay? We put our faith and we put our belief into the people that have stolen creation away from us. We put our faith and belief into the people that have enslaved us into this system. And then they turn around and charge us for the creation they have stolen from us. Okay? We've been doing that for a very, very long time. And I know it seems impossible. I mean, how did we not notice this before? Well, in this system that we're enslaved in, you have to remember that there's so many detailed lies meant to distract us. And only when we start to break down this system of lies can we then discover what we're living in. And then we can actually try to do something about it, at least individually.
So that we can pay the tax collector in the United States, it's known as the IRS. They then turn it over to the Treasury so that the Treasury can pay the principal plus interest on that bond that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. Now let's do a recap on this section because this is where the system begins to rob you and I on a massive scale. Much of our taxes are not used for schools, roads, and public services, but to pay interest on bonds that the Federal Reserve...
Now the schools and the roads and the public services that he mentioned, we already know. The schools, they're buildings of indoctrination meant to brainwash our children into the lies and distractions they control us with. And
bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. The Federal Reserve is committing fraud. But here's one of the biggest secrets of them all. Before the establishment of the Federal Reserve, there was no need for personal income tax. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and that very same year, the Constitution was amended to allow income tax. Do you really think this was just a coincidence? Ask yourself how much income tax you've paid over your lifetime. Much of it has been silently siphoned away into the hands of those who own the system. Yes, this system has owners. Who they are is...
Now you notice your red and blue for division, and your child in the middle is purple for a mixture of both, or royalty, or whatever they want you to believe it is.
Even bigger secret that we'll get to shortly. But first, we need to understand the mumbo-jumbo of the so-called debt ceiling. It's all based on a huge paradox. There was interest due on that bond, and there was interest due on every one of those loans that the banks made. That means that there is interest due on every dollar in existence. Let me ask you something. If you borrow the very first dollar into existence, and that's the only dollar that exists on the planet, but you promise to pay it back plus another dollar's worth of interest, where do you get the second dollar to pay the interest? The answer is that you have to borrow that one into existence and promise to pay it back with interest as well. So now there are $2 in existence, but you owe $4, and so on and so on. The result is there's never enough currency to pay the debt. There is always more debt in the system than there is currency in existence to pay the debt. Therefore, the whole system is impossible. It is finite. It will come to an end one day. What would happen if the government stopped?
Bottom line is, people, they admit that the money that they have enslaved us with is an impossible system. They admit that the system that they control us with is not good for us.
Borrowing to do deficit spending. Are the payments on those treasury bonds going to stop? What would happen if the public stopped borrowing and going deeper into debt? Are your house and car payments going to stop? No. There is a payment due every month on the principal plus the interest on every dollar in existence, and those payments do not stop. If we stop borrowing, then no new currency is created to replace the currency that we use to make them.
Those payments won't stop because those payments are the very payments that you make. Okay? We all make those payments. We feed this system that controls us. We do. We all feed this system, this corrupt system of money that controls us. We put our faith and belief into this system, and we feed it every day. I mean, if you stop and think about it, we help the system. We run the system that controls and enslaves us. We do. Okay? Basically, they set us up in this system. They made us have faith and belief in it, and we make it run. We run the very system that enslaves us. We can stop it at any time if we had truth. If we all had truth and we put our faith in truth, we could stop the atrocities that are being done to us by ourselves. We run the system that controls us every day, each and every day. When you choose to make a decision to go to work, you feed the system that controls you. When you choose to be programmed and controlled by the commercials on television to go out and buy the material items, you are feeding the system that controls you. When you choose to pay your landlord or the mortgage company to live on the land that you live on, you are feeding the system that controls you. When you choose to pay your electric bill, you're feeding the system that controls you. When you choose to shop at grocery stores for the chemical food items that we feed ourselves and our families every day, we choose to feed the system that controls us. And just like every system that controls us, this monetary system that enslaves us also manifests many, many negative emotions from each and every one of our souls. Money will cover the gamut when it comes to manifesting emotions from us. It has the ability to manifest positive emotions, and it has the ability to manifest negative emotions. And it has the ability to manifest I'm sorry about that interruption. I'm going to have to do a part 2 to this video so we can get into all the emotions that money manifests from us. I'm going to end this video right now because it's going a little long, and I always seem to have run out of memory or storage when I do longer videos, so I'm going to cut it short here, and we'll come back to a part 2. Y'all take care and be safe.